Welcome, everybody. My name is Cashman, Global Field CTO here at Trellix. And I'm joined by my partner in crime, as we say, John Fokker. Please, John.
Hey Mo, happy to be here. I'm John. I am the VP of Threat Intelligence Strategy at Trellix. So I have the honor and pleasure to work with a lot of smart people that try to stay ahead or analyze what our threat actors, nation states, cyber criminals, you name it, hacktivists are doing day to day, and focused on improving our products, our product efficacy, as well as putting all that intelligence into our products to give you better alert enrichment, as well as building intelligence products, intelligence reports, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, we're basically trying to keep Trellix safe from our perspective.
Yeah, and our customers too, because that's the key thing.
Yes,
Key theme this year:
that's what.
operationalizing intelligence, John. Right, and that leads us right into this piece here, because what we've identified is really the top 10 challenges, and part of that is driven by a lot of that's driven by the threat landscape. Top 10 security challenges that our customers and organizations across EMEA especially are have to deal with this year. And what we're going to be doing throughout the next couple of months within Trellix is taking a deeper look at each one of these. Right, so all 10 of these, we're going to be doing webinars and publications on how we can help our customers address these type of threats. But for this conversation, we can't get into all 10 in the next few minutes. But we chose the top 3 that we could have a little bit of a discussion about today. What's the most pressing threats and challenges faced by our customers? And I think the first one, John, if you would agree, is definitely advanced persistent threats. I mean, that goes across all industries, all verticals. What are you seeing? You're a VP Intelligence. What's our data telling us about that?
Yeah, so if I zoom out, because a lot of APT attacks are geopolitically driven, because there's a nation behind it and they're trying to gain information, cause disruption, you name it. And if we look at the EMEA landscape, or like predominantly the European landscape, Europe is extremely powerful. There is a lot of good innovation, a lot of things happening, but at the same time, it's made up of multiple states with their own rules and regulations, and you have European rules and regulations. But there is, if you compare it to your adversary, let's say the Russians or the Chinese or Iran or your main adversaries, if I might say so, they're more unified in a way versus you have smaller countries trying to defend for themselves as well. So that's what we see. And we see that there's a lot of interest in what goes on in Europe because, yeah, there's a lot of decisive factors. There's elections going on across certain countries. There could be even like decisions made around using certain technology, and it's very fascinating. And I'm fortunate that, like, within our threat intelligence group, we've just launched a service called Second Sight, where we hunt in customer telemetry and across the globe. The customer share telemetry with us, and our team hunts through the telemetry, combines that with our intelligence to get a better view. And we kind of stitch together low signal or low alerts and paint a bigger picture. And very often we find very sophisticated APT attacks. And one I would like to highlight is something that actually happened like 10 days ago. And it's around APT-28. So for those who are not familiar with APT-28, APT-28 is a Russian Nexus threat actor. And it's it's been associated or attributed to the GRU, so the Russian Intelligence Services. You can also know it as Fancy Bear and whatever. And our team was monitoring our email appliance, so from our customers. And what stood out was across Europe in multiple government institutions, we saw a campaign where APT-28 was leveraging a very fresh CVE to gain access to these victims. What was really interesting is we often talk about 0 days when we talk about threats, right? Because that's the thing you cannot expect. But people sometimes forget that, like, if you're a threat actor and you're leveraging a 0 day, you basically, by leveraging it, you give away the 0 day. So it's very costly. What is very lucrative, and what I can see from APT 28, they're very much seizing the opportunity at hand. So they're looking at a CVE that has been dropped very quickly. They reverse engineer it, they find out how to exploit it, and they build an exploit and they weaponize it within hours. And this was also within hours. And that's what they're basically betting on, is that not every institution is patching at the same rate as when the CVEs gets disclosed. So they're optimizing, they're using that window where organizations are not ready to patch up and they can leverage that CVE. And this was what's made this one stand out, because it was, we call it an end day vulnerability. So they leverage the vulnerability in Windows. They attach it to their email. And funny enough, like everybody thinks about macros, you did not have to use a macro on this account. So they were sending it out against government entities, and their implant was in memory. So it was harder to catch as well. We're lucky that we found it and we stopped it and we're able to attribute it. But this was all across, from like there's countries as in Romania, Greece, Slovenia. There's multiple countries in Europe that have received, and we stopped it successfully, I have to say, but have been at the receiving end of this campaign. And that shows us that threat actors, APT actors, are very, very interested in seeing what goes on within Europe, either to get information, influence, or disrupt, create a foothold and disrupt things as well.
Yeah, this is a part of it's part of warfare, and there's a part of lots of different whether that's economic driven or actual military driven. This is a part of it, and I heard a couple of things in there that are really important for organizations to focus in on. One is, well, first off, the speed. You can't patch all the time as fast as we need to, so you got to be preemptive in your security strategy. And one of the ways to do that is to get that CVE intelligence, for one thing, have that and use that as part of your risk management patch strategy, so you can prioritize if an actor is using that. We're delivering some of that through the Insights platform, which is awesome. I also heard a couple of other things, and EDR has gotten is a critical sensor, no doubt. Where you got to have the visibility, the telemetry at the endpoint. But I think equally, if you think of a sensor triad these days, it has to be email, network, plus EDR together. The advanced spear phishing techniques, the advanced delivery mechanisms, the advanced C2 techniques, exfiltration area tools and techniques, and also movement within the enterprise. Some of those things you can't detect with just one sensor in and of itself. Right? You might get a good signal, but you get a better signal and more confidence in that signal if you're correlating that and triangulating that. If you remember our session last year on skiing and triangulating, how to find somebody who's in an avalanche, triangulating that signal is really important. And I would say that the last piece is the first thing you said, John, is about hunting. Second Sight is a service we're offering, but in general, hunting is difficult for customers to do, organizations to do. They're focused a lot on IR. Hunting requires maybe different skills, different data, more people, maybe different types of skills, like I mentioned. And providing that as a service to customers, I think, really advances their resilience against APTs. So let's hit the next one, John. And I think up there with APT, and also they're leveraging this technique, is supply chain exploitation. And this one also has a frightening aspect for me, because there's so many variants to all the applications and pieces of software that organizations deploy, use, and develop. And there's so many nuances to this. It's everything from vulnerable libraries to vulnerable providers, cloud service providers like hyperscalers, cloud application providers. They're all part of your supply chain. In the OT side, you got a big supply chain as well, with different types of components and contractors and remote access. All of that is the supply chain. And from the threat perspective, though, John, whether it's APT or others, what's our data telling us there?
Well, supply chain is a very, and I try to generalize it from software supply chain all the way to like the larger supply chain, right? Because it can influence an operation, and it depends on how deep you go down. But that is a major struggle. It's a challenge. Let me put it this way. I can see that a lot of CISOs, a lot of security organizations are worried about this because there are things that are posing a risk that's outside of the span of your control or outside of the span of your ability to influence things. And then it comes with trust, and that's harder to do as well. And we see there's more like I can talk in a whole hour about examples of threat actors leveraging other pieces of software, or like the NPM package with the Shaya Halud. That was a great example. That was a software supply chain thing. So when we talk to our customers around intelligence, it's like understanding where your base layer dependencies, like, okay, which pieces of software do you use in your organization, from Jira all the way up to Office, to that's your base layer. And that's like just having an up-to-date SBOM, and then understanding what are the CVEs for these pieces of software. And then from a threat intelligence perspective, it's always very helpful to understand, like, have any of these suppliers been breached before? What have they been breached by a ransomware actor? Is their data being disclosed? And having that understanding early on, if there is let's say, you can't really prevent your supplier being hacked, because like that's impossible. But what you can do is, as soon as you find out, understanding through your SBOM and through how it cascades through your organization, understanding what the impact would be. And you can turn around and reach out to that supplier and say, like, hey, okay, we know you're breached. What's the impact? How does it affect us, and other things? Because it's transparency is key in this. And I know this is really hard, and everybody's saying, like, yeah, John, like, we tried, and they're not saying this, and we get this boilerplate reaction and all that stuff. But for your own organization, understanding what the dependencies are, I think, is really important. And then, yeah, you can take that to a certain level that you feel confident. And that really depends on the maturity of your organization, the amount of tools you have to your disposal. And it's also like, if you are, let's say, in a very, very restricted industry, let's say you make semiconductors, or you're in defense industry, or you do these things. Well, I would hope that whatever software you launch, and even for an OT environment, right, you would do a software review to see, okay, what are the dependencies? And if there's open source dependencies, okay, how does this process work? And you need to reevaluate these things, just like you reevaluate your suppliers. Like, I remember from the military in my past, like, if we flew a helicopter, the bolts in the helicopter had to come from one supplier that was certified with everything else. And that's similar to how our ENS solution is certified to work in an OT environment. You cannot just like place everything in there, because there's real consequences if things go wrong. So definitely SBOM, getting control, using threat intelligence to understand what the risk is. And when there is a certain risk or a breach of a supplier, having the ability to measure the impact and the risk to your organization is essential.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I love that, the certification piece there, because I think that's what Cyber Resilience Act is going for. You're trying to sort of create trust in the supply chain. Certainly, that's something that we invest in terms of certifications and product, robustness. I think secure development lifecycle. It's sort of maybe foundation, maybe a little bit considered old school, but it's not. It's doing the basics right and developing your software securely, and we help customers do that. Maybe people listening in might not know that, but we have actually quite a bit of a strong application security practice within our pro services teams. And I also just wanted to pivot a little bit to those repositories, because within the NPM, GitHub was involved, cloud services are involved for various aspects of the exploitation. So monitoring those, I think that goes under the radar to many SOC teams, many organizations. They're not monitoring what's happening, whether that's identity access management monitoring, scanning those repositories for malware, integrating malware scan into your CI/CD pipeline. Very critical, and just doing extensive scanning and monitoring of all those repositories. I think that's sort of a sensor gap in some organizations. So I think that those recommendations are important for organizations to get started and build more resilience in their supply chain. Now, John, we're coming up on the end here. I just want to hit one more real quick, which is increasing, we'll say the data sovereignty, data security issues. This is really very much an EU, EMEA focused area where, and I don't think I can speak to a government customer or even a critical infrastructure customer where data sovereignty does not come up. And your challenges to the data, we've heard that from both from APT, from ransomware actors. They're all after the data, whether they want to steal it, disrupt it, destroy it, deny access, what have you. There's also other types of threats going on in the, we'll say, the European geopolitical climate as we operate in today. All of that sort of adds a lot of complexity. And what do you hear about that in 30 seconds or less, John? What do you hear about that from either from the threat perspective or your own experience?
Well, if you talk about cloud providers, there's a couple of threat actors on the Chinese side and the Russian side, Nexus, that have been attributed to those countries that have a heightened interest in cloud providers. So you're looking at your APT 29s and your Hafniums and whatnot. And I think if you look at the European landscape, there is, and I honestly believe this is healthy. There's a change in geopolitical climate, and it's like, okay, do we need to rely on certain cloud providers that we have historically relied on, and do we put our crown jewels in those hands, or can we get safeguards in a way that we can control the sovereignty of things? And I think for any organization, and it's not calling out certain cloud providers, but I think for Europe, it's good that they're making movements to have a European-based cloud providing service, and the technical skill is there. Europe can deliver that. And at the same time, I think looking at some of our customers that are in that have the most secure environments, realizing that you could also have air-gapped environments. So making sure you have a layered approach. So yeah, you can have a cloud provider for certain services. That's no problem. But you make sure that your crown jewels, and it's kind of like a ringed type of thing, architecture, that your crown jewels are protected with something you can really rely on, and it's air gapped, and that there's nobody else coming in, and you have that control. That's something to consider. And I agree, it's trusting another cloud provider and just having it's flexible, and it's probably cheaper to engage firsthand. But if you have stuff that you really need to protect, that is worth the investment, in my opinion.
I agree. And in fact, we did the last Minded CISO survey, a research report that we put out every year, a couple of times per year. And hybrid environments was definitely an area where increases resilience of organizations. So keeping things on-prem, in private clouds, and sovereign clouds. There's having a provider that can cross all those environments, like Trellix, is really key to making it simpler, reducing the complexity of data security in those complex environments. And I think, John, with that, we're gonna end this one. I'd like to thank you for your insights, as always. Very, very, very good. And also, congratulations for your threat intelligence team for launching those new services. They're really going to be valuable to our customers. And our last note is that the webinars that I mentioned will be the last week in March, I believe, or March 23rd, 24th, 25th, around that time. Look for the invites. We're doing sort of a week of deep dive webinars on these topics. So please look out for those invites and join our SEs for more discussions on how to protect yourself against these key challenges and threats. Thank you all.
Thanks a million, Mo. It was a pleasure as always. It's always good chatting with you and sparring about these very, very important topics. And yeah, if people want to check out Second Sight, check it out on our website. It's an interesting service, and I'm looking forward to all the other sessions and all the deep dives.
Yeah, me too. Thanks again, John. Talk to you soon.